Hey, this is Roger Sanchez here on the Skittle Bus, and it's time to get into it with Skittle.
So we're here at Blackpool Festival, and I'm talking to Roger Sanchez. One of the first things I want to speak to you about today is I've noticed that you've brought back the S-Men. Yes. Obviously, you had a show at Ministry of Sound earlier in the year. What was it that made you want to start, A, get back in the studio, and B, get back DJing out with Sneak and Junior Sanchez for that?
Well, we've been friends for a long time, and everybody had kind of like their own career path. But last summertime, we kind of found ourselves all in Ibiza at the same time, and we started hanging out, and we were like, you know what? This feels right. Let's do something. Let's go into the studio and see what we come up with. And we came up with a bunch of different tracks. The first one, which is the release that we've just done called Who We Are. And we said, you know what? Let's bring back some of that magic vibe. Let's just get together and play. We actually did something in Miami at my Under the Radar event at 1-800 Lucky, which was kind of a bit of a taste of what was to come this year. And we just played the Southport Weekender Festival in London, and that one was phenomenal. It was great seeing the energy back with everyone, and I think we just vibe. Okay,
because obviously 26, 27 years ago, DJ technology was completely different. You obviously really famed for your free, sometimes 4-deck mixes. Sneak and Junior, obviously massively technical DJs as well. How different is the chemistry and vibe now with the technology going on? Have things changed, or is it literally the same sort of like atmosphere and things going off?
Well, I think what's changed is how much of the current element of using CDJs and using sampling drum machines that we're using, as opposed to doing it with vinyl and maybe a keyboard. The mentality is the same, though. It's kind of, we get together and we vibe. Each one of us has different strengths, but I kind of like to be the kind of thread that ties everyone together, and we're able to flow with each other. And in the beginning, it took us a practice session or two just to kind of feel it out. But I think we have that energy and that mutual understanding, and we all have different kind of specialties that we bring to the fore when we're getting together. But it works really, really well. So I think the main difference is that we've upped the game in terms of the accessibility of different types of sounds, but the mentality still remains the same.
Okay, well, that's good. Obviously, you guys have been around, for probably longer than the 27 years and you're since touring. And what I'm seeing in dance music a lot more, there's been very much a return to that sort of classic, 90s era of, really like disco-influenced house music, like soulful grooves and thing. Is that something, that style sometimes shifts in and out of fashion, but it always comes back. Is that something you're witnessing yourself on dance floors, not only in the UK, but around the globe?
It's the bass line. House music tends to be the bass line curve, which everything from techno to EDM was built on. The interesting thing is, I saw this cycle coming, because music is very cyclical. First, funk, soul, disco. Then when house music came in, that really set the new bass line. The disco influence, to me, it's funny, having lived through it the first time when house music really came to the fore, I saw the progression of, early house kind of sounds, the deeper sounds, and the disco sounds, getting harder and harder till it got to EDM, and then the recycle of it. So to me, I'm going to say this right now, the next thing you're seeing coming back is going to be a new variant on speed garage and kind of like the bass and grime sound, because a whole new generation is discovering things that have been out before, much the same way when I was DJing and I was mining the old funk, soul, and disco records to bring them into the house world. So it's interesting for me seeing that history repeating itself. It's almost on time and kind of like on schedule what's happening, but it's just the feeling of it. There's what you're really seeing isn't so much the sound returning as people missing the feeling of the euphoria that we captured the first time around. And the younger generation had a taste of it with what happened with EDM, but going back to the previous generation that lived through it, that are still out there, we're a lot younger in our age than our parents were. So there's a relatability that exists now that didn't exist with our parents' age. That's why you're also seeing that kind of older clubbing crowd merging with the younger clubbing crowd, and the sounds are inevitable to come back around.
Yeah, because it's interesting you say that, because one place where you've got that, because that has been, I mean, I've been raving for nearly 20 years, and it's only these sort of past 5 years where you've seen this generational, certainly in my lifetime, probably was earlier, in the disco era, but this like generational where you have like, people as young as 16, 17 going to their first clubs, and then people, in their early 50s who are going out. And one of the areas where you're seeing that, a good 40 to 50 year like age span, and where that demographic musically is at, at Glitterbox and Defected parties where you're a resident. So obviously you've had a relationship with Defected as a label pretty much since it's began and since Simon went out and by himself. But what is it are you experiencing from DJing there in IB for this summer that where, because Defected is on fire at the moment, isn't it? It's as strong as it's ever been.
It's interesting how, and I've told Simon, kudos and well done to have two different brands firing off at the same time. Defected, I think, is very much in key and in line with what's been happening on a current basis, or just in the last few years with the kind of underground sound kind of hedging back into a more crossover environment, with guys like MK and Sonny Fodera and guys like that really coming into the prominence in the fore, kind of this bassy UK vibe house, right? Glitterbox filled a void, and especially, it's funny because it started in Ibiza where it was all either techno or EDM, and there was this void of that feel-good dance music with vocals that was house but had that disco feel. So he kind of started off as a lark that just blew up into something that it just tapped into what was missing, that party element. When people used to go to Ibiza, back when I first started going to there, it was let go, have a party, have a great time. The songs were very important. This is what has been missing for a while, because for a while it was either drops and breaks, or it was just hi-hats, claps, kicks all night long, and there was no real direction to it. So I think the niche that it filled is a bigger niche than people even realize, and that's what's really been happening with Defected and with Glitterbox. You feel that energy and that vibe, and I have to say a lot of it comes down to the energy that Simon's put into it. It's like any brand, anybody that does something, when you feel the heart of the person behind it, that is something that's relatable. So I see that as being one of the major components, and really carefully curating who's playing the party and having a good sense of musically where they need to go.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. One thing you touched on earlier is obviously you're back in the studio as the S-Man, but what other projects have you got going now from a production point of view, and what can we look forward to from your record label Stealth as well?
Well, I have Stealth and Under the Radar to start from the label perspective. On Stealth, I have a lot of interesting projects, a lot more kind of artist-oriented. I've got this kind of South American, it's kind of hard to describe their music other than like ethnic meets house meets this deep kind of deep forest vibe called Pax. I have my next Roger Sanchez single coming, plus a lot of other vocal projects coming on that. It's got more of like the Latin feel to it, and a lot more of like the more soulful vibes. They tend to go more on Stealth. Under the Radar is a lot more on the underground tip. I've got the next S-Man collaboration that I've done coming up very soon with DJ Rook, and a lot of artists like Lupe Fuentes. I've got things coming with Josh Butler and a couple of other people. There's a lot of work going on. In addition to the continuance of the S-Men project, I'm also doing something a bit more experimental with a string quartet called the Scala from the UK. So we're kind of merging electronic music and classical. I want to do something that's a bit different from what you've seen kind of come back with, like, great kudos to Pete Tong for doing like the classical versions of house tracks and big anthems. And I'm trying to do something that's a little bit different. It's literally merging the classical music world and taking it into a place that's a little bit more from where I come from. So it's a little interesting to try to do something a bit different.
Okay, we'll look forward to hearing all that. It's great to speak to you, Roger. Thanks very much.
My pleasure.